Is the Via Media YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is quite prevalent right now on the threefold system of ecclesiastical polity. So I'm going to come at it from an Anglican perspective. When I talk about ecclesiastical polity, that is a fancy word for basically church structure. So how should the church be structured? I have went through a couple years studying of this whenever I was going through my transition from Baptist to Anglican. And so here's some of the things that I found whenever I was doing that, and I wanted to discuss them with you guys. The first thing I want to do, this topic really came into my mind to make my next video on was because of Ruslan's recent video on this of why he's not Catholic or Orthodox. And so at first, on the first part of this video, I wanted to go through some of his and kind of address some agreements I have with him and some disagreements. And so, yeah, I'm going to start with that. There we go. All right.
Apostles established bishops and priests, and those bishops established other bishops, and the only way to maintain an unbroken chain of apostolic succession is through that line. If we grant this presupposition that there is an unbroken chain of apostolic succession within Eastern Orthodoxy, Catholicism, Oriental Orthodoxy, so on and so forth, then the presupposition allows them to say, and therefore you Protestants have no apostolic succession and no valid church and no valid communion. Now in a minute, we'll look at what the scriptures say regarding this to the best of my ability. But what I think is interesting is that there really shouldn't be this idea of high church versus low church. Because most of these churches with apostolic succession all claim to be the one true church. Some of them are more friendly with other.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there for a second. By the way, Anglicans don't claim to be the one and only true church. We just claim to be one of the true churches, by the way. So that argument can't really be used against an Anglican. However, he is right. It could be used against Catholic or Orthodox. And by the way, Ruslan, if you're watching this, I do subscribe to your channel, even though it says right here I don't. I am not on my account on my computer that I actually follow people on. So yeah, don't get at me if you do end up watching this.
One true churches than others, but generally they all claim to be the one true Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now, I'm not trying to argue which one is or isn't, and I'm not even saying that Protestants have the one true and Holy Apostolic Church. We've never made that claim. Just interesting that the debates happening online are high church versus low church, where all high churches are exclusive in their claims to be the one true church. But that's neither here nor there. I enjoyed many of the aspects of growing up Oriental Orthodox. I still go back and visit. I love the incense. I love the liturgy. I think it is beautiful. But this idea of there being apostolic succession through the line of the bishop, and therefore Protestants generally don't have apostolic succession, is a sneaky one. Because there are Protestant streams of Christianity that do claim and show a unbroken apostolic succession, specifically the Anglicans. And some.
Yes, he is right. Thanks for the shout out, Ruslan. That the guy right here is Archbishop Foley, and he is the one that actually received me into the Anglican Church.
The scriptures, we see two passages specifically about overseers or elders. The first one is in Titus chapter 1, and the other one is in 1 Timothy chapter 3. Now, if we go here, this is Paul writing Titus, and he says, the reason I left you in Crete was...
So the two passages he's primarily going to use are the epistles of Timothy and Titus, and he brings up some good points here to which I will agree with. However, I think Ruslan is missing something here, and it's something hopefully maybe if he watches this video he can kind of see an Anglican perspective on this when I get into some of my information in a little bit.
You might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing. So here are the standards that we see Paul saying that an elder must have. Now, I love using my Logos Bible software. If you guys didn't know, they're a partner of the channel, and
so basically, I'll sum up because it goes for on a little bit, but go and obviously watch this full video of Ruslan's on Ruslan's channel. He gets into how seemingly Paul uses the word overseer, episkopos, and the word presbyteros, priest or elder, seemingly interchangeable. And actually, as an Anglican, we agree with you on that, even though we believe in the threefold system. This does not really change our viewpoint on that because, as you'll see when I get into some of my slides in a little bit, I don't think it really changes anything. One thing I do want to get into in his video before I transfer to my material is he talks about Jerome and how Jerome actually says that the threefold system was created at a later date, but it's not necessarily like basically saying that Jerome didn't advocate for it. So everyone go watch that video. Watch the full thing. I don't want to misrepresent anything he said. So, and by the way, Ruslan, I agree with you on a lot of this stuff. I just think that there is some further depth here that you could be missing out on, and hopefully you can kind of see it from an Anglican perspective. So, okay, so we've already addressed the Ruslan video. The agenda is going to talk about the bishop-priest distinctions with the scripture of Titus 1 specifically. We're going to talk about the church fathers and then how low church Protestants actually a lot of times mimic the threefold system and they don't even realize it. In the Anglican view, they view the priest and bishop slightly different than a Catholic or Orthodox does, but it also depends on which Catholic or Orthodox you ask. Anglicans say bishops. When we say bishops, we do understand that all bishops are priests and elders too. So no one becomes a bishop without being a priest first. And this goes in line with Scripture because when you call someone an overseer, you can also call them a priest because all bishops are priests. Think of bishops as a higher ranking priest. That job is not one specific local church, but a group of churches. They were given the role by the apostles not to create new doctrine, but to guard the apostolic deposit of the faith that is passed down as a broader church. Think of it this way. Bishops are shepherds of districts of churches. Priests are shepherds of the direct local church. We can see in Titus 1, this is in action when we look at the specific roles of Titus and Timothy. And we can also see Protestant groups, even some low ones, mimicking this, and they don't even realize that they're mimicking this. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to get into the scripture of Titus chapter 1 here. So I'm going to pull up. Okay, I've got it pulled up. Okay, so let's go through this, and then we'll go through some of my clarifications here. This is why I left you in Crete, so you might put what remained into order and appoint elders. So who's he talking to? This is Paul talking to Titus. Appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, the children of unbelievers, and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination, for an overseer. So this is why Protestants a lot of times, low church ones, will say, hey, this elder word here is presbyteros, this word here is overseer, and they're seemingly talking about the same person. And they would be right, and to an extent. For an overseer as God's steward must be above reproach. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, but hospitable, a lover of good, self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firm to the trustworthy word as taught so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine and also to rebuke those who contradict it. So these guys are the guards of apostolic teaching. Okay. So my question would be, what position is Titus in this passage? Because Titus is an elder, he's a priest, but for some reason he has authority over all the other priests in Crete. So is he an elder over one church or a group of churches? Why does he have the ability to, quote, put what remained into order for an entire country? The distinction of authority according to Paul and Titus is this. Paul has greater authority than Timothy. Timothy has greater authority than local elders. You can sub out Timothy or Titus. It doesn't matter because they both have the same concept. And then ask yourself, what does that seem to follow better? The apostolic church model, which is apostles, bishop, elder, or the low church model, following Titus 1, if you follow it to its logical conclusion of Titus being just a regular elder and then there being other elders, is the low church model is Titus 1. It says apostles are greater than elder, the elder being Titus, and then then that elder being greater than elder. It doesn't really logically make sense. And so even though, like I said, there is this this word can mean the same thing, we would expect that because priests, bishops are still priests. They retain that. They're just at a higher authority. They have been placed in a different position to guard multiple churches than a singular one. So, in Ruslan's video, he talks about a couple church fathers, specifically Ignatius, and they say that Ignatius is like the only guy from the early period that actually talks about this being the threefold office distinctively. However, I don't really think that's the case. And the ones he uses, Clement and Jerome and the Didache, I'll pull up in a little bit and kind of explain why I don't think that those are necessarily good reasons. So, first, we have Ignatius of Antioch, 107, disciple of John. It says, take care to do all things in harmony with God, with the bishops presiding in the place of God, the presbyters in the place of the council of the apostles, and the deacons who are most dear to me, entrusted with the service of Jesus Christ. By the way, Ignatius is not saying the bishop is God. For all of you guys that are super low church that might be freaked out about this, he's not saying that. He's just saying in structure, this is how the order of how things go. He's trying to explain the authority levels here between bishop, priest, deacons. Tertullian says the highest priest. So back to what I said earlier, the bishop is still the priest. He's just the highest priest. That is the bishop, has the right of giving baptism, then presbyters and deacons, but not without the bishop's authority. Irenaeus of Lyons says, it is within the power of all, therefore in every church who may wish to see the truth, to contemplate clearly the tradition of the apostles manifested throughout the whole world, and we are in a position to enumerate those who were instituted by bishops, by the apostles, and their successors to our own times. And then Hippolytus of Rome says, let the bishop be ordained, and all the presbyters and deacons stand by. These guys are all within the 2nd century, and they're all seemingly affirming the three-tiered system here, and apostolic succession. So I wanted to put a little map together because I think this actually portrays some validity as well. So whenever, if you were to see logically in a accretion, something that snuck in later on that wasn't apostolic, you would expect it to happen in a specific region, and it would take quite a bit of time, especially in the ancient world, to kind of spread. What's interesting here, though, and I'll explain this a little bit better later, is I've mapped here where all these guys that I just quoted are from. Athanasius is one I didn't quote, but he's another one that was a guarder of the faith, that was a bishop of Alexandria, and he had a part to play in the Athanasian Creed, the Athanasian Canon List, those things. But what you'll see here is all these guys I quoted are all over the known world at the time. They're everywhere. And they're so short within, I mean, you're talking within 5 to 80 years from the apostles between those guys. And they all seem to teach the same thing. Some lived in France, another in Italy, Tunisia, Syria, Egypt. These guys talked about the exact same thing. So you'd have to ask yourself, if this is something that somebody made up that developed later, why did all these guys develop the exact same system in that short amount of time with that great of distance? I just think it's something worthwhile, worth noting. So I'm going to talk about here the church fathers that Ruslan also addresses in the video that he thinks can kind of give weight to his viewpoint of the two distinct offices. Being the Didache doesn't mention a threefold system. It doesn't really talk about it. It's kind of the same as Titus. It uses the bishop and priest as seemingly interchangeable. So does Clement. The problem was these, though, is they were written when the apostles were still alive. So I will fully admit that the bishopric in the 1st century did change whenever the apostles died. Like, that makes sense. the apostles are the heads of the church. When they died, somebody had to replace them, and it was the students of the apostles, being Timothy, Titus, Polycarp, Ignatius. These guys seemingly replaced them. And it happened. I mean, it seemingly, to me, feels like they had this planned out and everyone knew it, because this happened all over the world at the same time with the same system. And so I don't really feel like the Didache or Clement necessarily really affirm this, because it still establishes the threefold system. It's the apostles, priests, deacons. And all I'm saying is that Timothy and Titus-like figures were there to take over and continue, not be apostles in the sense of having the authority to write scripture, but they were holding to the traditions that the apostles gave them. And so then you've got another one, the Jerome one. And he used that it was basically a later thing. Jerome says it was a later thing that they added on because to help with division. And I pulled up a quote here. When one presbyter was elected to be placed over the rest, the seeds of division were removed. So it's important to note here, they're using Jerome to affirm the two-tier system. The problem is Jerome disagrees with them. Even if you think that it was this much later thing, seemingly isn't because of Ignatius and those other guys I quoted, but Jerome agrees with it. The Presbyterian model quotes the Presbyterian models quote him, but for some reason, like, they think that he's with them, but he's not. So I made a little figure down here. The greater than authority here is the apostles, Timothy and Titus, like figures who they're preparing and they're setting up to help lead the church, and then the local elders and the deacons. And then when they died, you can see Timothy, Titus were greater than local elders because they were bishops in the Anglican view, and then they're greater than deacons. Then we get into church history, and so obviously when you're talking about church history, you have to pull up Eusebius because he's the greatest church historian in the I guess you would call it the church fathers age. And so I pulled up a couple quotes here of him that I want to share with you guys so you can see what the historian had to say about it. So he said, the avenger of the gospel then did not know that there should be one bishop in a Catholic church. Catholic meaning universal for those that aren't familiar with that. Yet he was not ignorant, or how could he be, that in it there were 46 presbyters and 7 deacons, but one bishop. So he's describing a specific area that has one bishop, 46 elders, and 7 deacons. And he's asking, how could he be ignorant? How could he be that ignorant? Seeming like this is just common knowledge. And then he also lists apostolic succession lineages. So Rome, he goes through and establishes, Paul speaks of Linus. And then Linus goes to Anacletus. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I think that's right. And then Clement, who also they try to use as a twofold system. The problem is the early church historians believe them to be bishops separate from local elders. And then I've also listed the Jerusalem one, and there's also other ones that he lists that are like Alexandria and Antioch and other prominent cities. And then we get to Tertullian, who has a cool quote that I really like that also seems to affirm exactly with the scripture and the history here. He says, they will reply that they have apostolic doctrine. So he's defending the faith from different churches around, like the Gnostics that are proclaiming to be Christians, but they're not really Christians. They're not apart. And so he's saying, how do we know who is a real church and who's not? And he says, they will say they have apostolic doctrine. Let them then produce the original records of their churches. Let them unfold the role of their bishops, running down in due succession from the beginning. So Tertullian's like, hey, if you're saying you have doctrine that goes back to the Bible, great. But you have to be able to prove that you actually have lineage from the apostles. Okay? Ideas to keep in mind. There are no outright combatants against the three-tiered ministry except sectarian non-Christian groups until the Reformation. So there's people that seemingly don't hold to it, but they're always considered sectarian non-Christian groups, or at least deep, deep in heresy. Why did this come into play at the same time around the world? Is it possible for it to happen without it being an apostolic teaching? This goes back to the map that I showed earlier. How can this happen all over the world? Seemingly within a very short amount of time in the ancient world where it's hard to travel. These guys that I quoted claimed its apostolic origins. And I would argue this, just as the Trinity has the basis in the New Testament, but has expanded in the early church through the councils, we all believe that Jesus is 100% man, 100% God. He's fully God, fully man. But those are concepts that, yes, I believe you can find in the scripture, but they're more expanded and well thought out as church history goes on. And I believe the threefold ministry is the exact same way. The church used authority structures already set in place by the apostles. Whenever the apostles died, they were adapted to continue the same system. Someone had to replace the apostles to keep the global church unified. The apostles prepared their students, Titus, Timothy, Clement, Polycarp, Ignatius, and others who all lived with them before they died, and taught them as their replacements to keep the deposit of faith. We know this biblically through the church fathers and broader church history. Church history, the Bible, and church fathers all align in agreement in the Anglican view instead of pitting them against each other. So notice, if you are in a different Protestant denomination, you might be able to claim one of those three things, but you can't claim all three of them. And in my mind, Anglicans, maybe like he said, some Lutherans are the only ones that can actually claim, hey, we have some biblical basis for this, we have historical basis for this, and we have the church father basis for this. And we're the only ones that actually can do that. And then I wanted to show some examples here, some low church Protestants that actually exercise the same system. They just don't realize this. So I was a Southern Baptist. Now I'm ACNA Anglican. And so first, I wanted to show how the Southern Baptist Convention actually seemingly kind of imitates the College of Bishops with their convention that are appointed as being greater elders, essentially. Then you have the local elders, then you have the deacons. Non-denominationals, it's either, sometimes if it's a mega church, he's the head of the church. I think of Pastor Greg Rochelle with Life Church, who I love and respect and love his messages, by the way. Or just a head pastor at like a local non-denominational church, then he has his own elders. Then it has deacons. So you're still mimicking the one bishop, multiple elders, multiple deacons system. And then the Assemblies of God, this one's pretty blatant too. They have superintendents which watch over multiple churches, and then they have pastors and elders, then they have deacons. So these low church Protestants on this list, and there's others too, they really mimic this exact same system, but yet they deny it. And so for me, it's like, if you're going to mimic the system, why not at least do it as the church has always done it, through the historic bishops? So my conclusion is, if low church Protestants are going to have a system that is almost identical, why not just be Anglican? If your convictions are that you can't be Catholic or Orthodox like me for specific reasons, but you do recognize that the bishops are a good biblical thing and historical thing, why not be Anglican? You can hold to your convictions, but you can also affirm that, yes, we can be on the side of history here and hold to our convictions without being Catholic or Orthodox. So that's really all I have today. I encourage, like I said, everyone to go watch Ruslan's whole video. I really appreciate him, by the way. He does a lot of defending for some of the high church denominations whenever I've seen him in some interviews, and he defends low church people too. And so I appreciate him for that. And I hope he's able to watch this. If he does, Ruslan, leave a comment down so I know to DM you, so maybe we can have further discussions about this. But yeah, and I also appreciate everyone watching this. I hope you guys got something out of it. If this is something you'd like me to pull up more scripture on, because I'm really just trying to go with the scripture that they used in his video and some of the church fathers, so I can expand on this more. But today I really just wanted to respond to Ruslan's video, and I thought it'd be a good segment into the differing opinions within a Protestant circle. So thank you guys for watching the Via Media channel. Like and subscribe. leave in the comments if you have any video ideas for me. I'm always looking at ideas for my next videos. So thank you guys for watching.